Hello, my most fabulous art friends. Last week we learned all about textures, or the tactile way that things feel, and how to draw them. This week we're going to take those textures and create a line landscape using what we've learned. So, making sure that you have your paper nearby so that you can remember all of the textures, let's see how we create this. So everyone's going to need a piece of paper and a pencil. Now, typically when I draw a landscape, I would draw it this way, holding my paper landscape style. But sometimes us artists, we have to break those rules. So we're actually going to turn our paper today and create our landscape in a portrait style. Just because those are the names of the paper doesn't mean they're the only ways they can be used. Now, to create our line landscape, we're going to be making interlocking lines that cross over one another going up the paper, creating a foreground or the front area, the area closest to us, a middle ground, an area farther away, and a background, the farthest area from the front of the paper. So to do that, I'm going to start by making bigger spaces, moving them into smaller spaces. I'm going to create these lines by crisscrossing in kind of a bumpy fashion. So it looks as though they're hills or mountains. Some of them might be a little bit wavy. There's nothing wrong with that. As I go back, they're going to get a little bit smaller. I'm actually going to end it with a wavy one. Now, something very important that we need to add, we need to make sure that we add a tree and a sun. Any other details you are more than welcome to add, but I'm looking for everyone's to have a tree and a sun. Now, where do you want these things, Miss Fontaine? Well, I do not want that tree right in the center of your paper. I want you to remember that this is the closer area and this is further away. So the tree will be very large if I make it in the front, but it'll be smaller in size if I make it in the back area or the middle area. So I'm actually going to start right around here, and I'm going to create only the side of a tree or one half of the tree. I'm going to do this by drawing a curved line following that pattern. So I'm going to come just a little bit above this, and I'm going to create a curved line just like that. Curve that a little bit more there. At the top of that curved line, I'm going to create a bumpy line that creates a circle. I'm going to make sure that I go all the way around, creating this bumpy line. And then I'm going to use my eraser to erase everything that is inside of this tree that I've created now. Next up is the sun. The sun is clearly going to go into the background. So the sun should not take up my entire background as it is far away. I do want to make sure that the sun does not end up in the corners of my paper. The sun should be somewhere in the center of our paper. Now, I want you to imagine when you look outside and look at the sun, we never just see a tiny corner of a sun. So while this is a nice, easy way to add a sun into a picture, I'm looking for you to either add the sun going across as a sunset or a sunrise, or what I'm going to do right now, adding a sun just up in the sky. I'm going to do that by drawing a circle and adding lines coming out of it. I like to make the lines different sizes. That's showing the rays of sunshine. Erase this other line. Now, before I start to add my textures, I want to clean up my paper. I want to make sure that I've erased everything that needs to be erased. I've darkened lines that need to be darker. And now I can start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these textures that I learned And I'm going to apply them by choosing different textures to fill different spaces. Now, this may seem complicated or confusing, but you can choose the textures that you enjoy drawing the most. You can also add in textures by using lines and forming them in different sort of bumps and ways to create a texture as movement. So watch how I do that. I'm going to start down here at the bottom, always starting at the bottom, and I'm going to start by adding hammock. I think hammock takes up nice big chunks of space, and it kind of shows like a hill would. See how that happened? Not as hard as it sounded. I'm going to continue doing this as I go back, making sure to choose a different texture for each section of the page. Some of them might make sense and some of them might not make sense, but that's the fun of it. I'm going to use big swirls here to create a big stretch of space. Can I leave that like that? No, I may not. Thinking back to how we did swirls, in each of these textures, we fill the entire space. Notice how I take my time. I'm not rushing through. I want to make sure that I fill every single spot. Now, what I said about lines before, I can use lines to also create a bumpy kind of rigid texture and go with the mountainside right here. You'll continue going until you finish filling in all those textures. Now, once you are done adding all of your textures, check that out. I added a texture in every single space. It's time to add color. Okay, now I know this is a daunting task. There's a lot at hand, and we can't just scribble over what we just did because it kind of erases all of the work you put into this. So you do need to take some time for this. Take it slow, maybe do a little bit each day until it's due or until our class meets, just so that it works out a little bit easier on you, maybe one section at a time. When you color the sections, you do want to make sure that they are in a pattern. There should be a pattern or a design. Whether you choose to go realistic with your colors or non-realistic is your choice. By realistic, I mean using patterns of green for grass and blue for water, yellows and oranges in the sky, browns and greens. Maybe you do want it to be a purple mountain, and that's okay. We do not have to have realistic coloring in this, but we do have to make sure that we color in a pattern or a design. So I'm just going to color one section right now so you can see what that looks like. And let's just say I was going into this section right here. I'm going to use crayons. What you use to color is your choice, but I am looking for this assignment to be colored. If it's due and you're not finished, you can just submit it with whatever you have colored. That's fine. You can always share the completed project with me later on. So I'm making sure that I'm creating a pattern as I'm coloring. I'm going every other one, and I'm going to make it kind of checked like a black and white checked floor would be, or a checkers board. And I'm going to color the alternating one in each section. Sometimes it helps to first outline. Sometimes when you're coloring, you get into such a zone, you just keep going and going and going. So by doing this, it might actually help to see which color is going where. Right. Okay, so that already is starting to look a little bit confusing. So I'm going to actually start to add in some of my other green. Typically, when we're coloring, you do want to go in the same direction, but sometimes when completing something like this, as long as you're using a crayon, you're going pretty fast, it should work out just the same. The darker color, I don't want to go so fast at the edges because I cannot cover that with the lighter color. You can see how awesome that starts to look as I've colored in a pattern, and it will continue that way as I go section by section and color. You want to make sure that you really color in this entire piece. This is something that you would frame and hang in your house. Real artsy, very realistic and abstract at the exact same time. I want to make sure that everyone understands you do not have to copy Miss Fontaine's. You do need to have interweaving lines, a tree, and a sun that is not in the corner of your page. But you do not have to use the same textures as me. You do not have to have the same amount of bumps as I do. That is yours. I'd like you to be creative and artistic. And of course, you can use textures that you've created on your own. We just want to make sure that we're very neat and careful with each one and that it makes sense for what we're doing. Well, I hope that everyone has a great time. Have fun, friends. And done, my friends. I used a mixture of crayons, colored pencils, and oil pastels. Sadly, because of the glare, you can't see it so well, but the yellows and the suns are actually every other color, and there are no white spaces. It's just a light yellow filled in there. I cannot wait to see what you create. Have fun.